call the short-term rental committee task force to order for May 29th. It is 5:30 for evening of public testimony. Mr. Barr, did you just want to give us a quick introduction, maybe let everybody know where we're at in this process?
I'm happy to, Mr. Chair, and the clerks would be remiss with me if I did not call the roll, so I will.
We should probably, sorry, it's like not an extension of the previous meeting. So we'll call the meeting to order. Mr. Barr, would you please call the roll?
I will do that. Ms. Collins.
Present.
Assemblymember Smith. I don't have Zoom in front of me, so I'm going to assume absence. Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Ms. Shivens. Mr. Dordia.
Here.
Ms. Treem.
Here.
Assemblymember Hughes Gandes.
Here.
Ms. Niven.
Here.
Mr. Kaslerich. Chair Bryson.
Present.
You have a quorum?
And Mr. Bryson, just to note, Mr. Smith said he is on Zoom.
He is on Zoom. Okay,
So
we have
need to bring him over.
Deputy Mayor Smith is present. Were there any requests for agenda changes? We'll go ahead and do this officially. Seeing none, we're going to approve that agenda, which will take us into if you just want to give us a quick update, Mr. Barr, before we go into public testimony.
I'm happy to, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So, while just for the benefit of the public present and listening in the room, I'll recap what I recapped for the meeting this afternoon. The committee has in all this material is included in the task force packet from this afternoon meeting. If folks want to reference it, the first 3 pages of that packet are a common document that has been in many recent task force meetings, outlines the impact levels, so the x-axis of the matrix, if you will, as well as the regulatory options that the task force has been working through over many meetings. And then the final page of that packet.
Might have.
No, we lost you.
The final page of that packet lays out the 2 regulatory options that the committee has selected as potential regulations for current or future assemblies to consider. Those are instituting a fee for the registration permits. Right now, the current status is that the registration permits that short-term rental operators are required to obtain are free. So instituting a fee would be one potential regulatory option. The second that the task force has moved forward for consideration is to consider a cap on the number of short-term rentals permittable per person or per entity. So those would be the 2 considerations, and then the metric or the level, as we've been discussing it, that the task force has considered to weigh those potential regulatory options against is the rental vacancy rate in town. And the last page of that packet includes a historical perspective, the last 14 years of the residential vacancy rate as reported by the Alaska Department of Labor. And I think I mentioned at the meeting this afternoon that after hearing and considering public testimony, both written and verbal, it would be appropriate for the task force at its next meeting, which I believe, Mr. Chair, you are considering to have 2 weeks from today. It would be appropriate for the task force to provide direction to me to prepare a draft report for you to the assembly, and you could either include more specifics about the rental vacancy rate and when you might want to recommend to the assembly they consider those regulatory options at, certain levels of vacancy rate. Or you could be unspecific and just report back to the assembly that those regulatory options be considered at the assembly's discretion, of course, at the assembly's discretion, and that the assembly use the rental vacancy rate as the primary factor that it looks at when considering regulation. I'll also note that unless you provide me with other direction, I think a key part of the report would be also talking about the task force's earlier decision that has already made it out of the task force, already made it to the assembly, already passed legislatively to require marketplace facilitators to collect and remit sales taxes on behalf of owners and operators, to allow to exempt owners and operators from that obligation when marketplace facilitators are doing it on their behalf, and to require marketplace facilitators to monthly report the active permit numbers in town, permit numbers that are provided by CBJ, CBJ's free annual registration program. Mr. Chair, if I missed anything or if there are any questions, I'm happy to go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Any questions from the committee? We're going to jump right into public testimony. We have a hard stop at 6:30 this evening, so we want to be expeditious with our testimony here. I know that some people have requested to be able to have a second opportunity to testify with additional information. I'm going to allow everyone who has not testified yet today speak first, and then if we do have time permitting, second chances at public testimony would be allowed. I'll, of course, announce who is up for public testimony, but I'll also try to say who's on deck. And so if you are up, thank you, we'll get that one first. If you're on deck, if you just make your way and be ready to testify. Giving everybody 2 minutes. When my dinger goes off, if you could complete the sentence that you are on, and that will complete your public testimony unless the committee has questions for the testifier. All right. Ms. Danhart, I'm going to call you up when we get to the that gentleman signed. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Barr. I'll have an answer for you on that one in just 1 second. But first, we're going to go to the Zoom participant. Do we have Mary Ann Ray online?
We do. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. If you'd introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you live in. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
My name is Mary Ann Ray. I'm the owner of Alaska Concierge, which does travel planning for visitors to Alaska. I live on Douglas. At this point, I have one vacation rental available. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the assembly on this. I'm very concerned about what seems to be a belief that short-term rentals are the cause of the affordable housing crisis. And I'm not sure that, in fact, I don't think that's true. I think it's kind of, it's an outcome, I think, of a much bigger economic problem in our country. I want to make sure everybody understands that affordable housing isn't just an issue in Juneau, it's a national issue. And it really has to do more with the price of increases in building materials, which have gone up. I just happened to do some research recently. Building materials have gone up 500% since 1975, while wages have gone up, and I'm talking now strictly building materials for residential properties and labor to build residential properties. The wages have gone up 29%. So you've got, and this is happening across many sectors of our economy, where you've just got wages that have been held down so much and prices that have gone up so much that the twain just do not meet. So it's not short-term rentals causing the problem. As a matter of fact, if you're expecting short-term rentals, the elimination of short-term rentals or the regulation of short-term rentals to somehow create more affordable housing, this is not going to get you there. I'm very concerned that there are other pieces that need to be considered here. Has the group, the task force, done anything on the number of people? Are we talking low income, middle income housing? Do we know how many units we need? Do we know if we need apartments or single family dwellings? Do we know what we're really looking
Ray.
at in terms of
Thank you for your
wanting to
testimony.
improve the market?
All right, that concludes your 2 minutes. Let me see if there's any questions from the
That's
committee.
all that was done.
Seeing no questions, thank you, Ms. Ray, for your testimony.
Any answers?
Ms. Ray. Next up, does anyone have any objection to Mr. Dan Hart testifying now? Mr. Dan Hart. And if you would introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're from, and you'll have 2 minutes. Oh, Mr. Dan Hart, you'll need to come to the stand, and then on deck is Kirsa Huskandes, if you could be ready, ma'am.
I'm Evan Danhart. I live in Douglas. I just had some questions. What data are y'all using to support the claim that short-term rentals are hurting the housing market?
Sir, this time is for public testimony. We're not
Okay.
actually going to
Okay,
answer
well,
questions at this time.
so if you look, so we have one short-term rental that's attached to our house. Our mortgage is north of $5,000. Any sort of idea that that's going to be converted into a long-term affordable housing rental is simply asinine. This is simply an opportunity this is taking a problem that the affordable housing crisis is currently ongoing, and blaming it on short-term rentals is just scapegoating something that's not the issue. The vast majority of short-term rentals are properties that are not available to low-income families. The cost of housing the cost that you would have to rent it out as a long-term rental is not sustainable to cover the mortgage. And the homes that are active short-term rentals now, if they weren't allowed to be short-term rentals or had additional costs, are not going to become long-term rentals. And so I think this is trying to find a solution to something. They're just trying to blame something that is not the problem, and then claiming that something was done about the problem while actually not doing anything to fix it. That's all.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for Mr. Dan Hart? See none. Thank you again for your testimony. Now up, Kirsa Huskandes, on deck, Tanya Cadigan-Corbet. If you let us know what part of town you're from and introduce yourself, and you may begin.
My name is Kirsha Huskandes. I live in North Douglas. I'm a renter, and I have at this point pretty much given up on the idea of ever owning property, or at least in the foreseeable future. Affordable housing is somewhat of an oxymoron in Juneau anyway. I think, anybody who kind of digs in when we're talking about limiting, let's say capping the rent on something that the city partners with, I think a lot of people's eyes kind of pop out of their head when they see what that actually translates to, because when you say affordable housing, I think people are thinking like some cheap HUD apartment that exists in their fantasy only. I'm here because I have friends who have been evicted from their apartments so that it could be turned into short-term rentals. So that is something that happens, and that is definitely an impact. It's not the entirety of the housing shortage story in Juneau, but it is a part of it. I also know property owners who have either converted to short-term rental from a long-term rental apartment, or have stated that they will be doing that because the money is just so good. Why would I pass it up? And I understand that. I understand that each person here is an individual making choices for themselves and their family, but we can't ignore the fact that that has collectively on our community, and it is having a huge impact. If you go onto Airbnb and zoom into pretty much any neighborhood, like I'm not talking about touristy neighborhoods, I'm not talking about like, well, of course, downtown's just like so perfect for short-term rentals, like who wouldn't want to have a place to stay downtown? I'm talking like the most residential neighborhoods in the middle of nowhere off of Back Loop. Multiple short-term rentals pop up. And I think that there's a difference, I think that when you look at somebody and they have multiple sites listed on their Airbnb, we can all see that. We know that you actually have a handful.
Ms. Hughes-Candies, thank you so very much for your testimony. One moment. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Hughes-Candies? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Hughes-Candies. Ms. Corbet, followed by Alex Burkhart. You're on deck. Ms. Corbet, if you just introduce yourself and what part of town you're from, you have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tanya Cadigan Corbett. I live in West Juneau, Douglas. And I'm here because my husband and I have a charter business, a charter fishing business, and we cater to probably 40% independent travelers, 60% visitors on the cruise ships. We constantly have conversations with independent travelers about how difficult it is for them to get a hotel. They're paying $300 to $350 a night for the Super 8 by McDonald's. They're paying $500 to $700 for hotels downtown, anywhere from the Gold Belt Hotel Sheraton to the Baranoff to the Silverbow. And I'm not saying that any of those places aren't worth that, but if we want to encourage independent visitors to continue to come to Juneau, we do have to also consider making that affordable as well. In addition to that, we also are the capital, and we want to continue to be the capital, I think. And we've got a short-term housing situation with people that come here seasonally, and that's important for our economy. And I understand it's difficult to keep everybody happy in terms of short-term and long-term housing, but short-term housing isn't, it just doesn't, I don't think it's as evil as we perceive it to be in terms of eliminating housing for other people. I've got, my mother and I have a duplex, and unfortunately we cannot do any short-term housing because we're zoned as a duplex and we can't offer any short-term housing. I have a garage studio for a future for if we ever need any care for my mother, and she's aging. However, it's strange to me that we have the opportunity to provide housing and we have the opportunity to offer short-term, but we can't. And I think that I'm not the only person in this community has that issue. I also know people in Douglas who have 3 places that they're renting on their own same property. So I understand it's tricky, it's difficult, but I'm just trying to support that short-term housing. I don't think it's not bad. It's complicated, but it's not bad.
Thank you, Mrs. Corbett. Are there any questions? Ms. Hughes-Candies?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here and for your testimony. So just to make sure I'm clear, if you weren't restricted by zoning, then you would potentially be interested in operating a short-term rental, but as it is now, you're unable to because of the zoning restriction?
Correct. And I would only want it to be short-term housing because if I needed it to turn into a caretaking situation, I wouldn't want to be in a lease situation.
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
Understood. Thank you.
Additional questions? Ms. Cadigan Corbett, thank you for coming and testifying. Next up, Alex Burkhart. On deck, Victoria Godkin. Mr. Burkhart, you have 2 minutes. If you'd introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you live in, and you may begin.
Thank you. My name's Alex Burkhart, and I live downtown. I'm here because I care about affordable housing in Juneau. I'll start by saying that I think short-term rentals are part of the problem, but they're not the main part of the problem. The 2024 Raincoast Data Assessment shows that the increase of people, mainly seniors, living alone has caused the biggest pinch to housing availability. That said, short-term rentals do play a part. I also understand that short-term rentals play an important role in the economy and fill a niche housing need in Juneau. I just think they should not be left unchecked and unregulated. I think we should continue to gather more data and identify different classes of short-term rentals. A whole house available as a short-term rental year-round versus a single unit in a multi-unit dwelling versus a bedroom are very different things and should be treated and taxed differently. I think any further regulations should be created with the goal of housing affordability for Juneau residents. There are a few points I would like to advocate for. You shouldn't be able to operate a short-term rental if you don't live in Juneau. I don't know exactly how to define live in Juneau, but I'm sure the lawyers can figure it out. I support the cap on the number of whole home rentals that a single person can have. And I think we may want to cap the number of short-term rentals in Juneau overall, but this doesn't have to be a hard cap. I think this cap could be effectively reached by levying taxes against them. This tax should at least cover the cost of any CBJ programs designed to monitor and manage short-term rentals. And then I'll finish by saying I think more money should go from the bed tax to the Affordable Housing Fund instead of Travel Juneau. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burkhart. Are there any clarifying questions from the committee? Ms. Euskandis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. One of the other potential recommendations that you didn't, if you have a short comment, do you have supportive or negative of the requirement to, no. What are the two things? I'm so sorry. We have two things that we've been talking about. Oh, yes, charging a fee. Right now it's free. Do you have any, are you supportive of if there was a fee for the permit?
I think a fee or some sort of tax would be
Okay.
appropriate, but I think it should be commensurate with the use of that property. A whole home rental for a full year versus
Got
a
it.
bedroom are different.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Dordea.
So currently there's a 14%, so 9% bed tax, 5% sales tax. What do you think would be an appropriate tax?
I think I would let the economists figure out what is appropriate there.
I think the assembly might get to this. Oh, no, the people, when, Mr. Barr, if we raised a tax like that, would that have to go to a vote of the people? Random question in the middle of public testimony, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give you the lawyer answer. It depends.
Thank you. Okay. Any additional questions for Mr. Burkhart? Seeing none, Mr. Burkhart, thank you for your testimony. Victoria Godkin, Ms. Wright, you are on deck. Ms. Godkin, if you'd introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're from, and you have 2 minutes. You may begin.
My name is Victoria Godkin. I live on North Douglas. I have provided long-term housing in Juneau for over 40 years. I have 11 long-term rentals and 2 short-term rentals. And I'm always nervous when I talk in public, so if I'm quivering, that's why. That's supposed to be my way of calming myself down, but it's not helping. One of my STRs has 50 stairs with breathtaking views. The other STR has a driveway that is 4x4 access during the winter only. And we also have a tow truck company on the side, an auto repair company, and we've had to use that tow truck to bail people out. So I converted them to short-term rentals because of both of those issues and the liability of people falling down, hurting themselves, and driving off the edge of the bank. And this has worked well for me. I am registered with the sales tax office and in compliance. I am here this evening to support others who have testified earlier today to minimize the STR regulations and encourage Juneau to look at the work Haynes has done in their studies on this issue. I believe Juneau is more like Haynes than any of the large metropolitan areas that we would be looking at, such as Hawaii, New York. And I also believe in free markets. I don't believe government control necessarily helps situations like this. And I also want to let everybody know that affordable housing has been an issue in Juneau for a very long time. Part of that problem, I believe. It was a problem when I moved here in 1979. And I had roommates as a single mother, and we all managed to
Ms. Godkin,
work through that.
that takes us to the end of our 2 minutes. Let me check and see if the committee has any questions for Ms. Godkin. Ms. Godkin, thank you for your public testimony this evening. Next up, we have Karen Wright, followed by Jeff Wright. Ms. Wright, if you'd introduce yourself and let us know what part of town you're from. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you. I'm Karen Wright. I live in the Mendenhall Valley off the Back Loop Road. I actually have long-term rentals, mid-term rentals, and short-term rentals. I'm also a licensed real estate professional. And I want to mention that in my opinion, short-term rentals are not the cause of the affordable housing shortage in any way, shape, or form in this town. As a landlord, I have had long-term rentals initially. I then switched some of those long-term rentals to be mid-term rentals, which were corporate housing. They were solutions for students, I've had everything from students to Coast Guard to shorter term corporate housing. And some of those units, I found that I really could not afford to continue as a homeowner, as a landlord, to continue to rent to the long-term thing. Some of it came from additional expenses that I had as a landlord with tenants that abused the privileges. But the short-term rentals that we have one that we purchased as a short-term rental and one that we've switched from a mid-term rental to a short-term rental. We really haven't had it be a long-term rental. The cost of homes in Juneau has increased exponentially. Affordable housing in Juneau has been a problem, in case most of you don't know, probably since the 20s. And I'm talking the 1920s. So for the last 100 years, we've had a problem with affordable housing in Juneau. We have not had short-term rentals in Juneau for 100 years. The assessed values keep going up. The cost of building homes keeps going up. The cost of purchasing homes keeps going up. The city on a regular basis puts roadblocks in the way to allow people to build things, and additional taxes are a big thing.
Ms. Wright, thank you very much for your testimony tonight. Questions, Ms. Hughes-Candies?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here tonight and for your testimony. So you do long, mid, and short-term rentals. Did you say that you just had 2 short-term rentals that you
That's
operate?
correct.
Okay, thanks. Just clarifying.
Additional questions? Mr. Coleman and Ms. Tree.
How long have you been working in the industry?
I have been a realtor for the last 14 years.
And what, if you think short-term rentals are not the cause of the issue of the challenge of housing in Juneau, what do you think are some solutions to the housing issue in Juneau?
I think that if the building department and if the community development department did not have so many regulations for developers in the way of being able to build affordable housing, some of the infrastructures, when we moved here in the 70s, you could have dirt roads and that was perfectly acceptable. You didn't have to have paved roads. You didn't have to have paved sidewalks. You didn't have to have curbs. You didn't have to have a lot of those things. And a lot of homes were built in that area. And they were much more affordable to people moving in. And we still had a shortage of affordable housing at that time.
Thank you,
That
Ms.
was
Wright.
1975.
Yeah, we could probably have lots more conversation about this question. I'm going to keep us succinct here. Then I'm going to go to Ms. Tree. All right. Additional questions for Ms. Wright? Ms. Wright, thank you for coming this evening and providing your testimony. Next up is Jeff Wright. Mr. Wright, if you just introduce yourself and let us know what part of town you're from, you have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Okay. Yep. Hi, my name's Jeff Wright, and that was my wife, Karen Wright. But we own short-term rentals and long-term rentals, and I believe that it's more of a supply and demand issue that's been going on in Juneau. The cost of property taxes sky high. Most people are using short-term rentals as a supplementary income to help pay their utility bills, their property tax, and then also that that short-term rentals are providing more income for the city as well, as long as they're regulated and people are paying their taxes. And but yeah, mainly I think it's supply, and that I don't believe that short-term rentals are causing the issue. And I don't know if anybody's traveled and used short-term rentals, but short-term rentals provide a niche for the visitor to be able to go out and have a place to stay where they can cook their own meals, they can do their own laundry. It's a whole different way to travel, so that's why it creates its own little separate thing. Some people just want a hotel room to crash for a couple of nights, and then other people want something that can provide more of a home feeling to it. You know? So that's my input on it.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Are there any questions for Mr. Wright? Mr. Wright, thank you for coming and providing public testimony this evening. Okay, so on my list, that is everyone that has not given testimony so far. All the first shots I have Ms. Heimbinger, Ms. Norman, and Ms. Josie. Are there any members of the public, I'll get to you, Mr. Connor, any members of the public who did not testify earlier today that would like to testify now? I want to get people, come on up, ma'am. I want to get anybody that has not had an opportunity to testify yet today and wishes to, would you please raise your hand? Sir, you'll be next. Anyone else? I'm going to, go ahead, sir. Okay. So if you'd introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're from. And 1 second so I can properly time us, sorry. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hey, I'm Jess Parks. I live in Douglas, right over the bridge. And I'm here to just speak up against some sort of rules about limiting the number of short-term rentals or regulating them. I've stayed in Airbnbs when traveling, they're great. But just since I've bought my house over there in West Juneau, there's, in the last year, I think 2 homes on my street were just bought up for, single house, short-term rentals. I know there were multiple offers on these houses. People were buying them who already have houses of their own, but were, buying these up to use as investments. In the meantime, there's families and folks looking for places to live who are leaving town because they can't find anything suitable. And it's hard to see people, using that as income when it's such a limited resource here in Juneau. And read through the packet, some of the stuff that they have in Sitka, Wasilla, some of the rules. I think a lot of communities have worked to find some kind of happy medium. I'd hate to see big corporations coming in and running it as big businesses, like I've seen in places like Palm Springs. I can't buy a house there. That's just all I wanted to say. Is I feel like it can change the character of a neighborhood pretty quickly, especially the street I'm on. There's only 2 blocks, and so 2 houses on the blocks being converted to short-term rentals can be a big deal. It feels like a whole different situation than somebody having a rental apartment in their own house that they rent out for, to supplement their income, pay their taxes, that kind of thing, versus rich people buying up whole houses to get richer. That's it for me.
Thank you for testimony, Ms. Parks. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Sir, yeah, go ahead. All right, say the same spiel. Introduce yourself. Let us know what part of town you're in. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thanks. I'm John Hollingsworth. I live by the airport. I'm not going to say anything new that nobody's said so far. I just want to tell you my story. I moved here in 2017, retired from the Coast Guard, and bought a piece of land right next to my house and with a purpose of building a short-term rental. It ended up being 2 small units over a boat garage, and one of them is currently occupied by a Coast Guard active duty member, which is important for me. The other one is a part-time short-term rental, I'll call it. The other seasons of the year that don't have a lot of tourists here, I use for medium-term, traveling nurses, traveling professionals. January through May, Alaska State Legislature stays there. I've only had it 2 years, and it's been consistent during that period. When I built it, it was on a budget, and I wildly passed that budget just because of how expensive it is to build anything in Juneau. Construction costs, land costs, not to mention property tax costs, which are exorbitant. I have an overwhelming demand for the short-term rentals and the medium-term rentals in the off-season, not to mention the long-term rental. I had advertised about 2 weeks before I booked it up for, it'll end up being a 4-year term. So it testifies to the demand of any housing in Juneau. I'd like to know if the task force considered the economic impact to the CBJ for further limits on short-term rentals, meaning property tax, or maybe not property tax, but sales tax and the room taxes that would be lost if you were to limit the short-term rentals. Also wanted to make the point that another member made the point that hotels book up quickly. They're very expensive, and the short-term rentals are there to absorb the excess demand. If they weren't there, then we would probably see a lot fewer tourists during the high season, and thus lower revenues for both sales tax, room tax, and for any small business in town that make their living off of the tourist season. Thanks.
Mr. Hollingsworth, thank you for coming and providing testimony tonight. Are there questions? Mr. Coleman.
Question, did you have a chance to look at the task force's recommendation?
I did briefly before I heard about this meeting about 3 hours ago.
And are you in favor of it or not?
Well, some of them I am. I think the hosting platforms can collect the tax that we're going to have to pay anyway. Both my units are registered, even though I only use one. It would create a little bit less of an administrative burden for me, not having to file every quarter if it's collected by the platforms and then delivered to the CBJ. I'm not in favor of an additional fee for registration every year. However, I think that's creating to pay for an administrative burden that's being created by by the assembly. It seems strange to me.
Thank you, Mr. Hollingsworth. Are there any additional questions at this time? All right. Mr. Hollingsworth, thank you for coming and providing public testimony for us today. Oh, one moment, sir. Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thanks. Sorry about that. If you could just hit on the last recommendation, which is a per person cap. Are you anti that as well?
Well, I almost registered my home for a short-term rental. I did not do that, and I wished I would have in the beginning because it's always nice to have options, not knowing what's coming down the road in the regulations. So maybe I still can do that. Maybe I would do that, but I don't think having a cap is necessarily within my beliefs. I think a free market open system allows for maximum flexibility, and that would limit that.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Again, thank you, Mr. Hollingsworth. And I have this gentleman right here. All right. Okay, so introduce yourself. Let us know what part of town you're from. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Yeah, members of the task force, my name is Griffin Plush. I live on Back Loop. I just wanted to maybe highlight, again, Mr. Burkhart's testimony, which I thought in particular, considering the different classes of short-term rentals is an insightful approach to this issue as we look at regulations more in the future. I know that's not something that necessarily is being considered at this moment, but I think of when I first came to Juneau as a UAS student, and 1 year I wasn't able to, I was not staying on campus, and I wasn't able to secure housing immediately. And so I rented a room through a short-term rental app for several weeks before I was able to find other housing. That room rental, connected me with another member of the community. That was helpful. I think that, when we can provide services like that through those types of short-term rentals, that is a value. But I also think back to, the community I'm from, Seward, where we have a lot more independent travelers. And with more independent travelers, we end up with a lot more folks staying in short-term rentals, a lot more of that demand on that market, which has become, really restrictive for especially folks looking for small rentals, right? When that's the market you're competing with, a lot of small attached apartments and things like that. There was a friend that I talked to down there, a couple. They were from the community. They wanted to find a place to stay, and the actual postings for longer term rentals were really limited. They eventually messaged somebody on a short-term rental app on Airbnb to ask, hey, I see that this has been posted for a while. Would you consider? And they actually messaged a few different folks, a few different listings, and it was the same person. They said, stop messaging me, you're bothering me, or whatever. But to make the point, that was when I realized, like, oh yeah, the sort of issue that's being addressed with the first policy being considered by the task force is a potential issue. And so I just appreciate the task force for introducing that. I also say Wasilla and Sitka have policies that seem more restrictive to me. And so this seems like
Thank you, Mr. Plush, for coming and testifying this evening. Are there any questions for Mr. Plush? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. I'm going to give folks a second bite at the apple. I have Brenda Heiminger, followed by Michelle Norman. Ms. Heiminger, if you would introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're from. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you. My name is Brenda Heimbigner, and I live downtown. I have 2 short-term rentals, and I have other long-term rentals. Thank you for allowing me to finish my testimony from earlier today, and I promise to focus on something that I didn't share with you earlier, and that is I deal predominantly with independent travelers and travel agents. And unfortunately, Juneau has a very bad reputation for being visitor friendly. And that stemmed from the Ship Free initiative. It made national news and it hit the Wall Street Journal because of the economic impact that they expected that we would see if it had passed. Fortunately, it didn't. However, no one expected that even though the initiative did not pass, what the negative impact on the national public is, as reported by the travel agents. The travel agents are telling me that their clients are choosing one-night stay in Juneau as opposed to the normal 3 to 5 that they were previously doing. The reason is that the travel agents don't want them to encounter any kind of unwelcome signs, any protesters or anything else that they have imagined is here because of the initiative coming forward. So what they're doing is they're using us now in 2025 as a hub to ship their client immediately through the airport, one-night stay, and out they go to the fishing lodges. On the way back, they're not even stopping in Juneau because the connections on Alaska are so good to Seattle and Anchorage. So we don't even see them on the back run. What the real damage is that they're no longer taking advantage of excursions. They're not spending money on retail. They're not sampling the restaurants. So that's where the real damage is there. Short-term rentals bring in 14% tax. That is the most of any of the other housing options in town. So restricting them, regulating them, charging them more money is only going to make us more visitor unfriendly.
Ms. Heiminger, thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. I now have Michelle Norman, followed by Marta Chasso. Ms. Norman, if you could just reintroduce yourself, let us know what part of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Sure, thank you. Michelle Norman. I live out the road. And I don't have anything formal this time. I just wanted to come back. I had so much to say last time or this morning, and I am going to be following up and sharing the emails that I've sent to the city and the information that I've compiled at that time. I just wanted to kind of reiterate a lot of the comments that folks have made here, is that I think short-term rental, focusing on the short-term rental is kind of for show. It's an easy, like, oh, that must be the problem. Let's make a big show. Let's do something about it. But really, affordable housing is the bottom line issue. we need to have more housing in Juneau, and not necessarily eliminating short-term rentals is going to solve that problem. Even if you take 100 off the market or 200 off the market or completely eliminate it. I also really believe in a free market, and I'm not comfortable with the city telling me what I can and can't do with my own property. I'd rather have some of them sit vacant than be forced to do something that I want to do. I've not experienced any of the potential negative things that were have been put forward of problems with short-term rentals. I haven't had parties, I haven't had noise complaints, I haven't had any damage with short-term rentals. I have had noise complaints, I have had significant damage, I've had theft, I've had all kinds of problems with long-term. I love my long-term tenants. I also really, really love my short-term tenants. I love sharing our community with tourists. I love giving them recommendations and encouraging them to go and see more than just the glacier when they come to Juneau. And I think it serves a purpose. And I'd really like this task force to take these comments to heart. I'm kind of disappointed that we have just this one day to give comment. I think this task force has been meeting for 5 months, and there was really valuable information that could have been shared early on at one public session, and then maybe now for a second one where you guys could get some feedback and information. So it's a little disappointing that this is all just packed into one day, one opportunity to say our piece that may or may not be taken to heart.
Thank you, Ms. Norman, for your testimony. Are there any questions for Ms. Norman? Seeing none, thank you for coming and providing testimony again for us. Marta Chaussee, did I say it right this time? Chaussee. If you just introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you live in. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Marta Chaussee. I live in North Douglas. I own 4 long-term rentals and 3 short-term rentals. I did speak earlier today. Thank you for the renewed opportunity to speak again tonight. I believe an economic impact study must be conducted before any restrictions are imposed on short-term rentals to understand how short-term rentals contribute to the local economy. For example, data should include per guest spending, tax revenue contributions, which could contribute to affordable housing projects, local job creation, such as cleaning, maintenance, management. Also, let's research Juneau's unique access challenges, no road system, limited flights, to see really how these impact short-term rental policy compared to other cities. Earlier today, someone here, brought up Haynes and their revised short-term rental policy. I'd like to suggest that the committee obtain and review this Haynes policy to see how it might be applied in a beneficial way to Juneau and its citizens. Let's make informed decisions based on facts, not assumptions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chaussee, for coming and providing testimony. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for providing testimony again today.
Thank you.
Next up, Colin Connerton. If you could introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're from. You have 2 minutes, and you may begin.
Sure. My name's Colin Connerton. I'm from downtown, born and raised here, landlord, short-term rental operator, and very, very near future homeowner as well. So I wanted to address something that I didn't get a chance to on the earlier portion. I know that maybe 5 sessions ago, Ms. Tree mentioned at one point that typically we don't govern with fees, right? I think in this circumstance, there's an opportunity to do so and to accomplish the goals that half the task force is very interested in, and also continue to allow the community, which is at large here, has been pro STR and is saying, hey, we don't really think that this is going to solve the problem, to solve the problem. And what I would suggest to the task force to at least consider is to consider implementing registration fees for non-owner operated STRs and tier them based on the number that you have. So you could group them in groupings like 1 through 3 or 3 through 5. And look, what's going on at Ridge, I think it's Ridgeview, whatever they have 15 or 20, that's not okay. And they should pay a serious fee
I mean, substantial to the city if they're going to be allowed to continue to do that. However, by increasing fees, by implementing an STR dedicated tax, by pushing all this money into a fund that's dedicated to solving affordable housing in Juneau, both rentals and I guess purchasing, but really we're focused on 12-month rentals here. You guys will be able to actually give the assembly the tools to succeed in addressing this by having millions of dollars at their disposal, all while not damaging the economy and our beautiful area where these independent travelers want to come and stay. And if we don't do something like that, they're going to go to Haines, they're going to go to other communities that are going to take their money, and we're not going to be anywhere near the solution that we wanted to be at.
Mr. Connerton, thank you for coming and providing testimony again. Are there any questions for Mr. Connerton? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming and providing testimony. That is all the names that I had on the list. Is there anybody in the room that would like, I didn't have two people signed up. I knew we would have one or two. Miss Denhart, I believe you were here in the room first. So if you'd like to come in testimony, and followed by Miss Dendinger. Is there anyone else that would like to provide public testimony tonight? I'm going to close public. I'm going to close public testimony after Kelly Dendinger's testimony. Ms. Denhart, if you would introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're from. And you have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Danhart. Thank you again for having me back. Live in Douglas. I know my husband tried to mention some questions. I will just read them so that y'all can consider them and as you're making decisions. But questions to consider as you're making these decisions are: what data supports the claim that short-term rentals are hurting the housing market in Juneau? Has the city calculated how much short-term rental tax revenue could contribute to affordable housing projects? How would Juneau's unique access challenges, such as no road system, limited flights, impact short-term rental policy compared to other cities? Can we create solutions that support both short-term rentals and affordable housing instead of an either-or approach, which was mentioned previously? Converting short-term rentals into long-term rentals would not solve the affordability problem. It's the wrong tool for the job. And let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say. There was a study done, the 2022 Ironman study, and the number of short-term rentals has stayed around the same level, approximately 375 in peak season and 180 in the off-season. This consistency shows the market is naturally regulated by season demand and Juneau's limited infrastructure, not by an oversupply of short-term rentals.
Ms. Denhart, thank you for providing additional public testimony. Ms. Hughes-Scandies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Danhart, for being here. Just a follow-up question to something your husband said that I wanted to make sure I didn't misunderstand. Did you, you guys have an attached one that is, part of the dwelling, and he mentioned the mortgage payment, and I think I misheard him, or did he say it was north of $5,000?
So with a higher mortgage payments, which are not rare in Juneau, I don't think that you're going to be able to convince people to convert an existing attached apartment into something that would be long-term. They're just not going to get the same profits from it. And they still want the flexibility to be able to have friends and family come and stay. And that is our situation. Even if for some reason we weren't allowed to do it, we just wouldn't make it available. So it wouldn't help.
Yeah, I'll follow up with you. That makes total sense, but is that the correct figure? It's north of $5,000, your mortgage payment?
That is what it was previously to refinancing. We are at $4,800.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Ms. Denhart, thank you very much for coming and testifying. Again, Kelly Dendinger. Ms. Dendinger, if you would introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're from. You have 2 minutes and you may begin, ma'am.
I'm Kelly Dindinger. I live in Ock Bay. Thanks for letting me testify again, and I will talk about different issues. I love some of the testimony that I heard tonight. Karen Wright brought up some great information about how the city could do, some more, make it a little easier for development as far as what is required with roads and curbs and sidewalks and whatever to make it so that they can actually provide housing that people could afford to buy. And then along those lines, like right now as it stands, when people try to buy a house, they want to be able to rent out like part of their home so that they can actually afford the mortgage. It's going to offset the cost of the home itself. And when lenders are looking at it, they take into account, like if you're planning to rent it, how much is that rental? And they take into a vacancy rate account and figure out, what you can afford. And if you can't have that rental income, then now this person is not able to afford a home at all. And so I do think that this is augmenting, our, situation where people are trying to move here, live here, buy homes here, and it is helping. So I also feel like, I don't really feel like we pay excessive amount of tax already, which I feel, should be appropriate enough. We have sales tax at 5%. So all of our guests are buying excursions, they're dining out, they're shopping, buying souvenirs for their, family and friends when they go home. They're putting a lot of money into our economy. Then we're paying the bed tax too, which, should help the city be able to provide, more help for developers to be able to build more housing and incentives for builders to build housing as opposed to, shutting off an income source that or people are making a livelihood out of. So
Ms.
anyway.
Dendinger, thank you for coming and providing testimony. Are there questions for Ms. Dendinger? Seeing none, thank you again for coming and providing testimony. That concludes the public testimony. I greatly appreciate everybody coming and participating. Mr. Barr, are people still allowed to make written comments, or can they still submit the written comments to you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, written comments folks can make those if they go to our website. If you just go to juneau.org, there's actually a button on the homepage. You can also go find the manager's page under departments in there, but there is a short-term rental task force website that has a form that folks can fill out. We've received lots of comments through that form. I've been passing them along to the task force as they've been coming in. And that website and form will remain live as long as the task force continues to meet.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. And the 2 Thursdays from now is the June 12th, and I believe that is our next task force meeting, and we'll be able to decide at that time if that's the last meeting or not. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Excellent. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.